All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. We'll probably start in about a minute or so, let some folks trickle in. Thank you all for being here. Our second event of Earth Week by Astrobites 2024. We're really excited to be hosting our third Earth Week annually. And our theme this year is, as students of nature, what can we learn from Indigenous science and teachings to support our stewardship of Earth in the climate crisis? So really looking at the intersection of not only astronomy and climate change, as our committee is focused on, but also thinking about bringing together Indigenous science and Western science. And that is what we are here to talk about today with Bridget. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Bridget, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Okay. So thank you for being here and thank you for having me, Wanishi Anishi. My name is Bridget Kimsey, in my language, Obsit Memekas, which I'll talk about in a moment, but because it really has helped recently for me to explain in a simple way the differences in lineages of sciences. But I'm a Delaware tribal member, the Delaware Tribe of Indians out of Bartlesville, Oklahoma and Kansas, also Irish and Scandinavian. So I'm trying to think, Tukwisak Teme, Wolf Clan, always important. Working on my opening, I go from being at Indigenous events. I was just at the Indigenous tribal, intertribal leader. I have it here because I knew I would butcher it and then I'd hear it from an elder. I'm just saying. All right, no, with all due respect. All right. So it is the National Tribal Leaders Climate Summit 2024, hosted by the Muckleshoot Tribe, the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. So that was really helpful. So it is, going from, I'll be at Norway at the 2024 Arctic Congress in a few weeks, and that's a very different feeling, but also bringing together the Sami people of that area as well. So that is, I guess, as an introduction. I think it's in my little bio that was coming with this. Yeah, really, I guess would say from 0 to 24, I was really involved with the performing arts, became a really great expression on physical movement. And I was raised and really connected with my Delaware tribe and members there and my family. And then when I went to NYU undergrad, I had a great education, I will say, at high school, Hanover High School, inside of Dartmouth College area, Hanover. And then I went to NYU for undergrad. But while there at NYU, I was lucky enough to be taken in at the American Indian Community House and lived and worked there for 5 years. So I just want to give some good accuracy for my knowledge base. I don't consider myself an Indigenous scholar. There are people doing incredible work there. But I do think I bring in a unique perspective as an American Indian. I was raised as an American Indian. I do know Native American and Indigenous people, and I continue to work my way towards Indigenous deeper sciences and maybe Indigenous knowledge, if I'm so called, which I will talk about as well. But I'm trying to think. So, that those formative years had a huge impact on me. And Olivia, you can stop me at any point. I am always going to be a storyteller at heart, whether it's in the creative arts, the sciences, or in working with students at UVM, University of Vermont here. Yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting journey. I'm autistic, so that's also been added in here. So of my view of reality. And I've had my special interest in trying to understand reality starting at the age of 3. I'm pretty aware of that. And this, I don't know if I was already questioning, my dad was a scientist at Johns Hopkins in electron microscopes, and growing up in a way there and loving the lab or the hospital environments. And then going home where it's covered in deer skins everywhere and antlers, and I mean, it just was home. And then we would be in the woods, and that was, or we go to Oklahoma or we go to Montana. So, it was either modern science or it was just so it was so clear for me. I don't have that broader scholarship, but what's interesting is that when I was in bad shape. Let's just be real honest. A lot of trauma growing up. Um, another time, epigenetic trauma has always, I think, when we think of nature and we think of how our climate, the relatives for us, for me, I can only speak for me, I guess, but they've been my biggest comfort when there's no one else there, or when I've lived overseas and no one is speaking the language, and it just been getting really close with going into a deeper way with rocks, a certain spot on the earth or a tree, just because of necessity, of friendship, of needing something, being in isolation. I digress. So let me get a drink of water. It's sort of a little early for me this time.
Yeah, I love how encompassing. I do think that is how an intro should be, is thinking about how we got to where we are and what formed us, and all of the parts of ourselves that make us whole people, rather than just these titles.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my next question. You sort of brought it up with your special interest in understanding reality, and I'm wondering if you would connect that to my question, which is, what got you interested in science, and what does being a scientist mean to you?
Well, yeah, thank you for that question. I think I've always been a scientist. I don't know how to not think in equations and physics and math, which I've struggled with, and I think I've been drawn to the creative arts. I loved the hard sciences a lot, but I didn't feel a way in as a female at the time. And I did not feel, I felt I was pushed more in a feminine direction because I am very, what might be considered in the United States, very typical of someone who's into a lot of makeup. And I do like things like that. Of course, I am very female, and but I'm also, how did I get drawn into it? I think it was I my in-depth exploration with dance, with ballet, with jazz, with modern, with character, with Spanish, with different indigenous forms of dance, and being part of that. I don't want to say at a superficial level, not involved deeply, because there's real knowledge and wisdom that goes deep, and that is not for any others to participate, even of other tribes. Okay, I always have to say that because I feel like this is getting lost in a lot of conversations, that it's okay. Where are we going to meet together? That's what I'm going to talk about today. But anyway, how did I become involved? It's just that, I just kept going deeper with the creative arts, and then that opened up to voice training, and then storytelling and drama, and Baltimore School for the Arts, and then professional work. And it got away from what I was interested in, which was a study. For me, whether this is a modern dominant culture that is very close to the bone, as I watch them watch them harm and hurt my family. So, I'm still in this deep trauma space that I can now just point to Palestine, and I won't bring that up again. I don't really have a position on that. Well, I do, but we won't go there. But like what I'm saying is it's very close to the bone, and I honor that there are things. So for science is my refuge. Science is my peace, because there are facts, and these facts, they can be broadened, laws can break, we can learn more. It can eventually evolve into knowledge after 5,000 years, maybe wisdom after 10 or 12, but it's my refuge. It's been my refuge every single time in my life. Is science, is the study of something, and coming back to the truth on it from nature and creation, because nothing's artificial. Everything's coming from somewhere. And physics teaches us that. But so for me, it was a slower process, but I think that I observe now, I've always worked in equations. It's an ethnophysics approach. It's a more feminine approach. I do not find or feel much female energy in the actual academic study of physics or math anymore. And that becomes a problem when I try to enter those fields for many reasons. But it was a slow process coming in because it was such a powerful love and such a powerful excitement that I feel like for me, I needed to be ready for it. And there was a lot of working in deep indigenous methodologies and medical lineages, starting usually around the 10 or 12,000 year mark, that elders at AICH started that wave for me way back. And it continued rippling and still ripples to this day, although looping back like time contracts, looping back as I age, back into my tribe in that way. But science, all along my path, it has kept me steady because I've been able to say, I don't know about that. I need to look at that. I don't know about that for me. Wait a minute. What are we really saying? Because I feel things have gotten very clouded. So even in medical lineages to take care of my body, physical, emotional, mental, energetic, I'm having to do something a little different as I'm watching people my age now severely falling off the cliff in ill health. And I'm not, and I should be, but I'm not. And I think that's because of my passion for getting to the truth and factual information, which is the whole point of science. Yes.
I'm just interrupt by asking a question from the chat just to explain an acronym that you mentioned, I think is AIHC.
Oh, AICH. Yes, sorry.
AICH.
The American Indian Community House. That was where I had mentioned at the beginning, I lived and worked for 5 years. And what I was going to say briefly was just, even though I had my just Delaware tribe experience growing up, by being at AICH, living and working, and actually living at the original AICH, so we're talking like a lot, we're talking some decent time and a lot of elders coming through. And I got the most amazing, oh my gosh, how was I so lucky and blessed? I mean, to have all these 50,000 tribal people from around Turtle Islands. We're talking Canada, United States, Mexico, Mesoamerica. So, it's really servicing. If you're coming through New York, you can be, and you're part of a, unfortunately, the services at that time are only for federally recognized tribes. But, we're just going to keep that down low. They tried to be very embracing. And so I'm lucky. My knowledge base, again, is coming from education from those elders and from that setup, which was more on the Haudenosaunee, Iroquois Lake area, and Lakota as well, and some Lenape. Okay, thank you.
Last time we talked, one of the things I found really interesting is the way that in all of your aspects of your work, and we haven't touched all of these yet, but thinking about healthcare and AI and space sciences, and even in creative aspects and storytelling as well, thinking about listening to the stories and the playbooks from nature. And I was wondering if you could expand a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. I do think I was like protected from a lot growing up. My grandmother did a lot, and even my father in his way, to protect me from a lot. And I'm sorry, I'm distracting, but it leads into what you are saying. Can you repeat it one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, something that my question was a bit rambling, but something that I appreciated last time we talked was the way that you listened to the stories and playbooks from nature and how that informs aspects of your work and life.
Okay. So the playbooks, I think that was something, okay, little kid, this is inner city Baltimore. from Baltimore, Maryland. And I grew up with my dad's huge electron microscope pictures of red blood cells, platelets, of like different pathogens. So I'm sitting there like staring at that, and staring at his, I couldn't understand, I still can't understand some of his work, but I could appreciate just what is going on in there, because I don't think electron microscopes at the time were really that widely utilized. So the images were still, this wasn't something you'd see every day. So in between the antlers, there are these incredible, but it really made me think, what is the story in there? And what's interesting, excuse me, everything I've done has led one right into another. All it's been, the whole thing has been an exploration in creation. That's it. That's all I'm doing. And so to understand more deeply the psychology of the brain and the heart and the self, for me, instead of psychology, I went for drama and the performing arts and dance. And that really gave me a lot of what I needed. So I find that I would try to find a way, I wasn't even conscious of doing it, that would allow me to bring in home of, when I speak Lenape, I definitely can feel, I feel a home, and so it could feel home, but bringing on my interest of what is this science? How do humans work? What is this human stuff? And that I was still focused on that by the time I got to AICH. And then my level of empathy and allowing in love for me, unconditional love for the first time. Well, not for the first time, my father is first, I'd say, but like allowing and really feeling allowed to be me. That just opened where I wanted to do what I was doing on stage. I wanted it to be real. So most people know that throughout global Indigenous and even modern history, that the arts are a healing mechanism. There's a lot of neuroscience, there's art therapy. We could go on in peer-reviewed papers. The playbook from nature is that, storytelling and creativity is healing. How, we could go on and on about the ecosystems and how they do their dance, or even the orbits and the solar systems, how they do their dance. And by having a dance moving through the body is extremely healing, no matter how we look at it. So everything I do is me interfacing with all of these playbooks in biology that are so much older than the human species. How do I compare, 300,000 years to something that is 4.6 billion years? Where we're gonna go with that? Like, really? I mean, honestly, like, come on, like, really? Like, it's just, I think my books, I understand they're thick and they're long, and I already have I've been working on my master's and PhD and my PhD, and I just don't, but I will get there keep them moving. But honestly, I don't even, trying to figure out what the heck happened. And it's not just, oh, it's all like white, it's all just white people. It's not that. It happened everywhere. It's all over now. I don't mean all over. I just mean it's the whole human species, the whole Homo sapien, and everyone does have their own healing and stuff, individual, in their tribes, in their groups, in their communities, in their organizations, at the top, at the billionaires. Everyone's got their stuff to deal with. I get that. But where do we all go for guidance? Do we go to ourselves right now? Or do we do what older humans have done and looked at the playbooks in nature? The playbooks in nature have always been looked at scientifically. This is, I think, a misconcept, and I don't know where it came from or why it's being promoted. I also can only talk about my training, and I also can only talk about what I learned at AICH. So that's just my personal 24 years. I was told numerous times, if I am looking at something and I think I know about it, keep watching it, keep taking notes. If I'm, this goes now into starting to work with different healing modalities. But one of the first things I was taught is you never go with your gut. You never go with what you think, ever. You go with what you see repeating in nature on repeat. That's it. So I do not understand where, and when we get into knowledge, we're talking. Okay, so I finally was able to see it after being at this conference, and I've really been thinking about it because a knowledge bearer had pushed me on the AI thing, and I really wanted to take that to heart, no matter where it was coming from, because I have found, just in my experience, that the greatest truth you may need to hear might come in poison, and it's how to work with that poison to not poison yourself and to extract the truth. So you'll hear me talk often about things, and I'm often using somewhere along that biology to astrophysics on a modern language. Why do I not talk from the Lenape point of view, let's say? I can definitely get into looking at the engineering of different structures. I can definitely get into the sociology and complex structural system and the playbooks of how those are created from watching in nature, if that makes sense, and having however long. But what we get, so that's where Indigenous science and Western science meet for me. And I can talk more about that in a moment. But when we get into Indigenous knowledge, we're over here. And Western modern science is stuck. And they're having this conversation and they're fracturing, and I don't really know what's going to happen. And they're reaching for Indigenous knowledge, which has you can't take the Indigenous knowledge and put it in the modern Western dominant science. It just doesn't. You can, like in yoga, we see this, they have this conversation, long time, well, maybe not that long, 150, 200, they're still having it. What out of this 12, 15, 20,000 year knowledge base, wisdom now over here, through knowledge, as you're coming into the Ayurvedic science that we are willing and able to share, that will be able to be safe, well, hik bishun, good medicine, all right, able to create change and effectively help, can only meet modern Western science, modern Western Eastern dominant science, Indigenous science can only meet you there. So there's this fracturing I'm seeing happening all through the complex structural systems of the modern Western Eastern dominant structural systems, which I've seen, which are everywhere. And so, I think my study of the human animal for 30 years, and still in study, including of myself, but going really deep on a few older lineages and then combining that in ambulatory settings at 8 different hospitals, one of them being Mass General, just to give some concept, mostly the Northeast. It's not that different. It's just a matter, like I can work in Indigenous scientific ways on my patients with cystic fibrosis in an ambulatory modern Western world and have good rapport with the doctor. They know I'm going to stay within my scope. They call me an integrative healthcare practitioner. That seems to work. I'm able to do work that's effective and all is good. The problem for me and why I'm here today is that it starts to buffer into knowledge, and I don't like that not being seen at the table. And I think what is being seen at the table can only be understood and seen as Indigenous science. So if people bring Indigenous knowledge, it has to be somehow minimized or put down. It can't really be seen. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I'm like, Obsit Mimeka says my name, like white butterfly. Like I'm good here, my little engine, but I don't, have the broadest reach, more like the little
Bridget,
peacemaker. Right? Try to.
I'm sorry. I'm wondering if you can clarify a little bit. So we talked about this a little, but I think it would be helpful to reiterate the differences and what you exactly mean by Indigenous science, modern Western science, where those boundaries are, and then broader into Indigenous knowledge.
Okay, this is a work in progress. I'm going to be honest with you because I think, well, there are many things, but we're going to stick with your question. But so this is a work in progress. Ask me in 6 months. I might have more or less or have changed my position here. And if you are Indigenous or Native yourself, please be kind to me. Okay, I'm just sort of figuring this out myself. Okay. Thinking how to start. I try to keep it like centered and concise. Okay. So I think elders saw in me how much trauma I was dealing with, both from being raised and also through epigenetic trauma. And I was curious how we were in New York City, why the first person they wanted me to work with and see was a yogi from India. And I was very uncomfortable with that idea. I was like, this doesn't sound right. You know, like, no, just stop. I was like, all right. So I went in and I was very lucky that my journey with yoga has only been with very old and kind masters. And before it became what it is now in the US, I've really been able to understand more too, beginning to understand how they're keeping the science, the knowledge, and wisdom. I was just speaking in class last night. I was like, okay, here we are in hero's pose. And I've been exploring this for about 30 years. And it just took about 3 months ago, I finally understood it. So that gives you some understanding of, you know, of how much time I've spent maybe in yoga and the science of yoga and Jessica Char's work in engineering of yoga. So I always feel embarrassed that I've gone to other cultures and Indigenous cultures or have been gently nudged, pushed with a Hotoakan love in a direction I might not have seen for myself. And I now see some of the appropriation happening, and it's just very, I don't resonate with the integrative health community at all, or the New Age community. I'm sort of horrified by it, to be perfectly honest. So I don't really know where to go with it. So I was like talking to some elders and they were like, you know, you could just use Indigenous science, or you could just use Indigenous methodology. You know, that is what you're doing. You know your training. We know your training. It's all good. But with social media, it starts to feel uncomfortable, to be honest. But I am happy to still do some of my work with the VA. And hoping to continue with that a little bit on the side, as I like to keep my pulse on where humans are right now and giving back to our Ilas, our warriors of the United States and of other tribes. So I've gotten off topic again, I know. Can you reflect to me again? Did I not answer your question? I know I got off.
Yeah, I was asking about where's the transition, or
Yes,
whatever word you would use, from Indigenous science to knowledge.
and this is
then,
what, like, yeah. I'm trying to take like an encyclopedia and bring it into like a peer-reviewed journal, and I'm like, damn, this is not going to sound good. But yeah, so I hope that makes sense. So then, at this point, and this gets really weird, but I won't even go there. How the federal government paid me to gain all my skills back, like, you were just killing us 150 years ago. So it's a little interesting, but here we are. And it's that going back and forth and saying, you know what, we actually are human beings. We actually need help. Where are we comfortable sharing? And if we're not comfortable, don't share. And that's okay too. And if you don't want to share, I'm okay with that. That's okay too. But where can we find a way that works for everyone? And so, I think that I'm very respectful obvious of modern Western dominant science. I was raised in it. And so I speak the language, and at this point, in that way, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, but I am a healthcare provider, and I do accept insurance, and what have you. So, having respect. So here we go. I'm gonna take my ring off. I walk into a building, a land, an organization, and I have respect for their work because I do. And so I speak their language because I do. And I don't ask them to speak in other terminology. It is their terminology I am speaking in. And it is their terminology that their insurance is being paid in. So it feels like I can bring my full self, and I can bring Indigenous science and what that will look like. Let's take someone who I've worked with enough people with CF, cystic fibrosis. So here's, this is only mine. Again, I can only talk from my experience, but a lot of the research has been focused on because, unfortunately, CF patients were dying at 11 or 12 years old. Now that they're living longer, some of the PT that I've observed from where I've worked it often isn't missing. It's stopping, right? It hasn't quite gotten to now they're living to be 16, 17, 18, maybe getting ready for a transplant of some kind. So if I'm working on a children's wing, let's say, and I'm going in because the CEF patients are coming in at least maybe once or a few times a year, I can look at their cells. So if you imagine sonar or LiDAR, that's helpful. I've worked in a way that my body is the sonar instrument. That makes sense. And so I don't need any special equipment ever. I'm just looking at it, and I can see it, and I can read the story. So if you go into everything's in motion, right? I'm always in a lot of motion, but everything's in motion. And so you have this friction, right? Right? It has a story. That's when you hear knowledge talking about consciousness. This is where modern Western Eastern dominant is on the cusp. What's happening there, right? What's actually going on? If you think of a quilt has layers, reality has layers. We all know it does. I mean, this is just quantum physics I'm talking about now. So I do find the best intersecting. We're here in Indigenous knowledge. You want to come and join us, keep going with the quantum physics and keep going with seeing other things break down in you and saying, oh shit, maybe, possibly, I built this and I want this. I want to go further with quantum physics. You want that so bad? Come back to basic tenets of what it means to be alive as a human being and part of Haki of Earth, not just on it, but you are Earth, you are stars, it's who you are. But I'm hoping that's what I'm hoping for, is maybe the interest and the love, the curiosity will have it break it down to get back to basics, to have a stool to stand on, to go further. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great point in thinking about, at least from my perspective as, I guess, a Western science practitioner and someone who was raised in Western dominant culture. One of the issues I see, let's bring it back to climate change now and the climate crisis and thinking about that. And what I really wanted to focus on today is thinking about the ways that we do science and practice science in the context of the climate crisis and what sort of teachings we can bring in order to be better stewards of the earth. And I think what you said is a great point. The way that I have been taught to do Western science is fairly extractive, trying to observe nature and extract resources from it. And that is the system that it's based in. And that is, as you said, not the case. It's not reality. The reality is this relationship. But just to use your word of this fracturing in Western science,
Yeah.
and maybe that's a launching point for you. And I also wanted to ask about, you mentioned a few climate summits, one previously and one in the future. If you could talk about this fracturing, the system of Western science, the extractive relation to nature components, thinking about how we do science in the climate crisis.
Okay. You know, this is a hard one, because everyone who's really watching the data, you know, I've been freaking out about the data for about 3 years now. Ucheme, you know, care for all of us. And I think that was very present at the intertribal. It's been promoted 2 different ways. I call it the Intertribal Leaders Climate Summit. You know, it was a different conference in that I walked in, and so you have both Indigenous scientists and modern Western dominant scientists working together on a project, which is the climate. I was there I'm looking at restructuring, architecting AI with nature intelligence. And there's nothing artificial about AI. It's just changing the source of how it is created and the reasonings why behind that. So anyway, that's why I was there, to see people who are already doing this, who are already looking at what hasn't been working and what can we do to make work, and what does this look like? What does this really look like? And it was a quiet conference, powerful, wonderful people, wonderfully run, wonderful Muckleshoot tribe. But you know, there was a table with herbs, both for Indigenous people and to buy. You know, it was just a lot of it free, to help with grounding and healing. There was a lot of good conversations about the American Indian movement. Oh yes, sorry. The names here, I actually have it with me. I know it's backwards, but it's the National Tribal Leaders Climate Summit, the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. Yeah, and the other one is the 2024 Arctic Congress. Yes, and if you have trouble finding it, I'm on LinkedIn. You can just, I have it. It should be posted somewhere. I posted about it in the 2024 Arctic Congress. Yes. So I was kind of, you know, and then the AIM movement, which I had affiliation from my father with, and it was great to see Tatanka Means. Some people know him from Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't know him personally, but his father, Russell Means, is well known in other ways before he was born. And Tatanka has done well for himself, obviously. It was very funny. He was but bringing out a comedian, bringing out humor to help. You know, because these are, you know, bringing in joking, right? Bringing in laughter was really important. Because every one of us in that room, all of us have been traumatized, and all of us know the data sets are not good. They're not good. They're not good. But you know, I come from a tribe, we were 60,000 in Lenape Hoken. We struggled for 200 years staying there with what was happening, and finally we're fighting, leaving, trying to figure it out for 200, whittled down to 1,900. And I'm here. I'm here. But it hurt. And that's the honest truth. So if you know it's going to hurt, how do you have the art of grief? How do you midwife this? I'm going to bring in the female here. I'm going to bring in, how do you bring in the art of pain? And I don't mean by causing more or getting acclimated to it. I mean, you shore up with what speaks to you, with what you love. You shore up with connection that will hold you. What held our tribe together was the bloodline. Wasn't that there wasn't evil going through our tribe, just like in other countries. It was the bloodline. It was the tradition. It was the language. It was the science of doing what works and following the truth. The resiliency loss is a huge issue in every industry, because life is always changing and science teaches us that. You know, I always come back to science because I feel safe. I feel safe in hard sciences. You can't fuck with me, not you, but just the general, you know, just a general sense. And I think that's obviously where I'm at with the trauma, you know, still working with like, no one's trying to get you, you know, it's in there, but there's a sense of like, no, here we are. We can critique, you know, we can critique it and say, maybe you mean that, maybe we're talking that, let's open this, let's look at that. And I'm okay with that. But the ignoring of what animals and the climate is showing you, we are the only, is this not true? We are the only animal currently destroying ourselves. And I think the bigger question is for each of us to go, why? For ourselves. When you know why you're here, why you're really here, what you're really interested in exploring, and you're walking that path, you will naturally connect and work and help in ways you can't even imagine, because you're coming authentically. You're not coming from a soundbite. You're not coming from someone telling you to do it this way. You're thinking for yourself, because everyone, I'm so tired of people telling me, I work with young people, telling me that you all can't think for yourselves. You do what you got to. Stay connected a little bit, but maybe pull back. Maybe find that special rock, sit with 5 minutes a day, 30 days, record it, see what happens. I love that shit. I'm not going to go on someone telling me, oh, you'll feel better. Maybe I won't feel better. Maybe it will pull me over the water and I want to sit there, but it will start a real discussion, you know, and then you build your own knowledge about what you're learning in school. You say, yeah, but you know what? That's a harming someone. And if I'm, you know, how do I make that right? Or how do I do that? You know, I'm talking about like in a lab. Am I, you know, it's a discussion. You are in discussion with neutrinos. You are in discussion with the sun at Cosine. You are in discussion with electrons that have formed and clumped into other things. There's very little of me here. It's mostly just energy, right? It's all we're dealing with. So you know, my vote is that, you know, when we're talking about climate change and climate science, is if my tribe didn't believe the impossible can happen, I would not be here. There are 8.1 billion of us on here, and there's a structural system that we all know doesn't work. It doesn't work in computers. It doesn't work when we try to check out at the grocery store. It doesn't work when we're on our phone and we don't actually have communication. So this is why understanding people scientifically, understanding the mitochondria, and then going off Earth to get a clean read of even species that are older, much older than me, even older than the Earth. What do they have to say? And I record everything. And that just helps me to see where there's an inaccuracy or where is that subjective or objective information, and then to compare it to someone else doing the similar kind of work. But I so encourage, keep it simple and come back home to yourself, away from everyone. And see, that's also something I feel is a bit of a misconcept. Like, you have the tribe, and that's important, but people, humans, you're allowed to have your individuality and say, this is what coming from an authentic place showed me a good path for me. And then others, your friends, close confidants, will talk with you and hopefully respect and either say, I don't know if this is highlighting something about you, or, ooh, that sounds like your path. You know, being able to help you, but it's you who have the gift. And I think that goes missing in the climate change, is looking outside, look inside. And I get tired also of the polarity. You know, I think that's, you know, Western, Indigenous. I'm American Indian, you know, like, I'm working towards Indigenous, but like, you know, I still have a colonial, I'm still doing that. I'm there, I'm right there with you. I have a little more push, but I'm right there with you. And elders that were kind were that's why I encourage, talk with kind Native people who also know to respect the lineage and not give more than they should. Yes.
I want to take a pause and make sure that our audience knows that they can ask questions in the chat and the Q&A function. And then I also have another question for you. So feel free to use those at any time. We have about 15 minutes left of our discussion. And I was thinking as you were talking about this, thinking about your looking inward, thinking about your individual purpose and the concept of individual action. There's these two competing things. We know that the oil companies, Exxon, et cetera, have been feeding us this propaganda that individual action is going to solve climate change. And I wanted to explore this concept a little bit where these two forces in opposite directions of community and collective action being effective ways to advocate for the climate, and also thinking about how we can find this individual
right, because I won't be able to follow the whole thing.
Yeah,
I'm already. What I would first do is say, is Exxon a valued member of the community that is healing and helpful to all biological life forms? It's just yes.
No, you asking the question.
Yes. Okay. So if Exxon is not a healthy member of the community, is a toxic member of the community, is that correct? I just want to break it down, simple by simple. It helps me.
Yeah. I would say so, in my opinion.
Okay. Has anyone tried to work with Exxon? Like tried to talk with them, tried to show them what they were doing, held them accountable, showed them images of the travesty that they were doing to their Mother Earth?
I would say that they have been informed.
Why do they still exist? Why are you still talking with them? Why are they not on the, why are they still viable on the planet? Exactly. I break it down like that for me, because if I try to take it in all at once, my brain goes, woo. All right. So thank you for working with me on that. But it's true. I think it's as simple as that. Humans are very smart, very, very simple tenets we're talking here. And someone had mentioned, when do I go into Indigenous knowledge? It's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be something that, if I talked about things that even I've experienced, that would not feel comfortable to you, and that would make me feel bad about myself, and you might attack me. So I don't want to share that, if that makes sense. Or if I do, I share it in my books, and people can have their own opinion about it. But I don't encourage people to read my books if they're just going to be mean to me. They can ask questions for sure. But Indigenous knowledge feels like something other, and I haven't quite figured out how to talk about it. And I don't know that I should. Should astrology, sorry, we're getting off topic now. Should astrology be considered Indigenous science? Of course. The Mayans did incredible work. Holy crap. My God. They were able to what? Figure out where the stellar nebula was and that it was producing stars. And this is like an isolated Mesoamerica, like not even connect, like no one had visited them. There was no Arab, there was no other, history of astronomy. There was nothing going on. They just were like, ooh. And so, yes, absolutely. But I don't know that Indigenous astronomy might actually be part of, well, if we're looking at it from science, absolutely. If we're looking at it from a knowledge base, it's not going to work. And I was thinking about that today and posted on if people were interested in going towards Indigenous knowledge, how to do that. Yeah, what were you saying, Olivia? Did I answer that about Exxon? It's just, that's the thing. That's the thing. How do we make Exxon no longer a viable? How do we, as 8.1 billion people, make Exxon not viable? And sometimes you do have to work in the system, but it seems like even working the system doesn't work. The system is corrupt against Exxon because the US makes too much money, or so-and-so has a trade deal. So really, the problem is not humans. The problem is the complex structural system. And the problem is a very small handful of humans that now all have freaking bunkers, a majority of them, and think they're going to freaking wait it out.
Yeah, that was sort of my point, less about Exxon and more about this tension between individual responsibility and individual purpose.
That's the difference. Mm-hmm. When I talk about an individual moving and figuring themselves out, they're coming from a community that has created something and helped them to create a healthiness. I don't believe, I could be wrong, I don't believe if someone was sick, what you are describing as a sickness would not be healthy for that individual or for nature or for the tribe if they went out on their own. That would be something that would need to stay in-house. So that would not work. And that's why I think it is important to have Indigenous people who can go between the aisles pretty well to say, no, that is not what I mean. You don't mean any, and I don't mean any, it's just trying to find that translation that is correct, if that makes sense. And again, these are things I'm still working through, and I'm always open to a graceful kind, critique about, like, have you thought about it this way? Have you looked at it that way? Because I'm always curious, But does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I was just thinking about this back and forth of how we can find our individual purpose, how we can stay engaged with advocacy, and also stay hopeful.
Yep. So I was flying back, and if she sees this, I won't give her name. I won't even give her where she was going or any better story. But it's such a beautiful, I was sort of thinking about, like, how do I want to engage? And this young woman who was about 20 sat down next to me, and she was on her flight back home, and she was feeling bad. And she's like, I know I shouldn't. And then we got to talking because her phone had died and she needed a charger. I was like, okay, needs a little charge in a few ways. And she brought up that same question. She brought up that same question. And you can do whatever, but do nothing. Just sit there and start there. I even was thinking, when I would put my hands on the earth, it took me time to allow for the exchange to happen of energy leaving my hand and the energy of the earth moving through my hand, because it was 6 months of crying because of trauma, and I needed to be ready for that. And it didn't necessarily heal, but I think when an elder said a long time ago in my history, you will need to go very deep on the soil here. There's a lot of blood to get to the soil. And that's the truth. And we all are going to somehow work with that. And I want to say, living in that, it's okay. It's okay to have those hard feelings. And the hope, I think, is found in that modern Western science is on this cusp and is also being called out for not being kind, for not honoring this, for being that. And this, birth is messy. Birth, I mean, I don't know if anyone has kids. It's a shit show, man. It's not. And a beautiful baby comes out and it's great, but it is, oh Lord, and we don't know what's going to happen. And we don't know and even when you give birth, you don't know what's going to happen. But the one thing, coming back to birth, because I feel like this is the birth of something new for everyone, is we've done it. What were we, Neanderthals, whittled down to, again, a 1,537, and that sustained us for like 1 million years. And then we repopulated. That was one theory I heard. It could have been disproven at this point, but but I heard that about a year ago, and I was like, wow, there's something to that, and I've moved my focus also to, I might have already said it, Wiliteha Mausit, which is the path of beauty and kindness. And I don't know what will happen, but if I start each day with that and keep working with that, it begins to open a little bit more. I know that the data is not good, but I also think the data has been tremendously horrible at other times. And we will come out of this having learned some valuable lessons. And other tribes, I know in their history, weren't able to learn the lesson, so it's a fluid thing, and we haven't done anything wrong. It's things got into a wrong direction and have been hard to wrangle in. And I think that humanity is truly rising up. And wherever you feel comfortable And maybe that is just sitting on the rock each day. And that is a huge, ginormous contribution. It really is, because it's not contributing to something that is tearing humans and tearing the earth apart.
And how does that mindfulness and really just sitting with Earth come up for you in your PhD, for example, or in your study of space sciences?
Well, it's why I went into space studies. You know, I sat with it for 2 years, and it was first, I was really close with, and this goes a bit into Indigenous knowledge, so it may not make sense. But at least I'll give an example, and I want to honor that question. And so I've been going to the same patch of small forest for about 20 years. And I really got close the last 10. And even though these are not my homelands, let's say, I was not born here, I feel like I resonate real strongly with the lands of Vermont and Ochu, the hills and the forest. And yeah, we've been through a lot, learning about the trees and the plants. And I thought I would go deeper into plant medicine because of my time on Mallorca, Daya, in Spain, where I was really able to spend time with this mountain and was able to see that there was like coding, that there's something really interesting going on with these plants. Like it's much deeper even than just biology. I was like, what's going on here? And so I thought, and the trees, first it was like my experience in astrophysics, and I was like, yeah, but this isn't really gonna, oh wait, it does sort of, I don't know. And they're like, no, you need to understand quantum physics. And I said, I know that. Like, I know I need to go deeper with that from a modern Western slant. And they just sort of, the plants, the tree was the one who said, we're no longer clean. We can't get a clean read here. You are gonna need to go out to get the information to bring it back and to help us. And I said, all right. And that was my decision to go towards space studies and not plant medicine for now. But it was the right one, and it has proved to be correct over and over and over again. So it was not something I still went at my own pace. If I'd started it and didn't feel right, I'd say, but we had built up a relationship. So that sitting and that walking and that taking my time, that discussion, when I was in need, the plants were able to give me a clean read of the information that I needed to help them, and the situation on Earth was going to be out there and to come here with it. And that was also hard to hear, you know, like, what do you mean it's not clean? I don't understand. I didn't understand till later. So there was a trust element too, but they were also trusting me, you know, that, you know, it just worked, I guess. And I think that that can happen for people. And I could break it down even further, but I don't want to disrupt an experience and a way of working that is proven to me. I still take records of it. I'm still trying to scientifically look at it, which maybe I shouldn't, but I do. But I'm hoping, so I do have a vested interest in modern Western, like, come on, let's go. I want to be able to explain this. So, you know, I don't know that elders would like that so much, but you know.
I think that is a great sort of wrapping up
Sure.
point, is thinking about how, and our theme this year is learning how to be better stewards of the earth as students and as scientists. And I think this putting energy and attention into listening, really listening to nature and embodying being a student of nature and having this relationship with nature in both our life and work as scientists and educators, et cetera. I think that is a really important point, and the interconnectedness of all things.
I think it's, you know, it's so available, and it's okay that if you go out, there's resistance, make it 1 minute. You know, and if you don't even understand why you're only making it 1 minute, that's okay. You know, and it seeps in, and that won't be everyone's experience. Some people are naturally already at it where I'm not, but I did find that it made me look at myself even more deeply. And that was hard for me. It may not be hard for others. So I don't want to, but if it is hard, I've been through it, and it's okay. It works. It sort of flushes out, and you keep going. It's okay. Mhm.
All right.
Oh,
We're at the top of the hour here. Go ahead.
were there any questions? I'm sorry, I know I saw the little chat room.
I think we answered all of
Okay.
them. And so I'd like to start. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you. It's an honor to talk to you, Bridget.
Oh, thanks.
And this recording will be posted on our website and our YouTube. So it will be available in a summary post. And to everyone, feel free to tune in to our website and our mailing list, which I believe all of you are on. We have 2 more events happening this week for Earth Week 2024. So thank you all for being here.
Well, thank you, Olivia. Thank you. Be well.